oceans of the world can already be a terrifying place, but what if we made them infinitely more terrifying? How, you may ask? Well, by throwing in giant sea serpents that can shoot beams of energy from their mouth, eels that will drain you of your blood, football fish that can flashbang you and summon entire black holes, and jellyfish that will drag entire cruise ships into the depths of the ocean. So I'm gonna take you throughout the waters of the world of Pokemon, and you are going to find out if you can survive the terrifying depths of these oceans. Hi there, I'm Curlic, and we're going to be going through from region to region to talk about how the Pokemon within each of the waters of each continent survive, what they eat, what they do, and how might they even try to take you for their next meal. By the way, we're not just limited to water types with these regions, as there are a number of Pokemon that state that they stay near the water, fly above it, or are coastal in general. So, let's begin in Kanto. Luckily here in Kanto, there aren't a ton of fishy Pokemon that you have to worry about, just 2 or 3, or 4, which really makes up most of them. And those will rip you apart in an instant, given that exact opportunity. So let's begin with actually the Poliwag line. And Poliwag itself isn't really much of a threat. Sure, every Pokemon can be dangerous, but Poliwag isn't interested in eating you. Heck, even in its Dex entry, it states how it will use its big ol' lips to suction itself to rocks in rougher waters and bite out its time, and grab food wherever it can. Maybe it'll walk onto land, but it's not very good at it and will run at the very first sign of trouble back to the water. When it does evolve into Poliwhirl, it is of course stuck in that transition between tadpole and frog, and so it's going to go after more meat, but it's not limited to just bugs, of course. No, it is going to be eating fish as per the information that it does state, and typically frogs might eat mice or anything along those lines, but at this stage, it seems like it's not interested in eating any sort of mammal. And it's about 3'3", 1 meter on average, so even if it did, sure, it could eat a couple of larger mammals, but when it comes to other Pokemon, probably not. Now, if you do happen to run across the rare Poliwrath, that's when you're going to start having problems. Sure, it doesn't directly state that it is hunting any new creatures, but I would not make it angry. Why don't I just read off its information for you? Poliwrath's body is almost entirely muscle, and the muscles in its arms and legs never tire. It also has 0% body fat. When it swims, it uses all the muscles in its body and is able to swim vast distances with minimal breathing. It is even capable of briefly running on the water's surface. It can also smash through ice and plow forward using its strong arms. Poliwrath is capable of outswimming even world-class swimmers. Poliwrath is also skilled at martial arts. It can launch powerful square punches, capable of crushing boulders into dust, and many children learn how to swim by replicating Poliwrath's movement. It is one of the most gifted swimmers of all water-type Pokemon. Really weird to say that it is one of the most gifted swimmers in the more traditional sense, when there are plenty of Pokemon that move faster than it. Now, running back to world-class swimmer, I recently covered the speed of all Pokemon, so it has been stated to beat a champion at a single medley, meaning that it would swim at a speed of 3.69 miles per hour, as that is roughly the speed of the current champion, Leon Marchand, and which he swam at to get the championship and get the world record. So even if you can somehow swim that fast because you're the type of person that goes, yeah, I could do it, I've got nothing to worry about, then I want you to think about the fact that it can go an incredibly long distance without having to breathe, meaning that eventually it will out-endure you and then catch up to you. But, again, just don't make it angry, and we're just scratching the surface of what we're up against here. Psyduck is actually a really weird one to consider here. On one hand, you have a big old duck that is very unaware of its surroundings and too occupied with its own headaches to even do anything. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the same Psyduck can accidentally lose these headaches in the form of psychic power and just your brain. Psyduck are commonly found in ponds or lakes. It is a duck after all, so they're going to be common. The last thing you need, though, is to go on a lovely little stroll and end up getting your cranium split open by accident because these Pokemon are having a bad migraine because of the pressure brought on by, let's say, heavy rain coming in soon. Kind of like what we see with all these Psyducks that Cynthia gives her remedy to and cures their headache. On the same level, we have Golduck, who is actually an incredibly aggressive Pokemon in the wild, at least in Pokemon Legends Arceus, because I don't know about you, but I can't take a hit from them. They waste no time whatsoever, pull out their strongest move, and hit you with a Hydro Pump. and they usually don't live alone for that matter, so you're probably getting hit by multiple of those moves at once. Now, Golduck is a fast swimmer capable of outswimming even the most athletic of humans because of its webbed appendages. Even rough seas do not hamper this Pokemon's swimming abilities, and it will sometimes rescue people from shipwrecks. The trading card game depicts Golduck with the ability to shoot massive jets of water from both of its hands simultaneously, using them to propel itself underwater. The gem on its forehead glows when it uses its psychic powers, and occasionally when it swims at full speed. So again, even if you were to try to run away, odds are it will come after you and it will catch up. Thankfully, they don't care about eating us, they're just very territorial. Just, again, don't ruin their homes then, because old tales claim Golduck punishes those who defile their rivers by dragging them in and taking them away. They will likely do to you what they do to fish. They first disable it, then capture it, then bring you to shore if you weren't already there, or in their case, or our case, they'd probably bring us underwater. And if that wasn't enough, it's probably going to use its psychic powers to relay to other Pokemon that you are currently paralyzed on the ground and you are a free meal. Now we're starting to get into the more scary territory of Pokemon, as we have Tentacool and Tentacruel, our super jellyfish. Tentacool's entire body is made up of 99% water, and the remaining 1% contains the organ that produces its poison. It absorbs sunlight and refracts it using the water inside its body to convert it into beam energy. Its tentacles are laced with stinging cells, and as seen in the Pokemon the Series episode Tentacool and Tentacruel, it can control Pokemon it touches with its tentacles. The tentacles break off occasionally, but they can regenerate. The poison from its tentacles is so potent that someone would need to be immediately rushed to the hospital. Tentacool is not a very strong swimmer, traveling throughout the world using ocean currents. Tentacool searches for food while drifting on the surface of shallow seas, and it can blend in water, making it very difficult to spot. It will sometimes wash ashore and shrivel up due to dehydration, though it remains equally as dangerous, in other words, no touchy. And if you throw it back to the sea, it can be revived. So, even though we have jellyfish in real life like the Man-O-War, which, while not deadly, can leave some nasty, nasty stings that makes you wish it was deadly, this jellyfish in the Pokemon world is absolutely deadly, and you have to be rushed to the hospital immediately, or you're probably not gonna make it. So, can you just imagine, even if you survived that, if a tentacle were to attach itself to you and start to just mind control you? What if it just decides to plop on your head and walk you into the water to where you can go get eaten by the rest of the tentacle, which probably aren't even going to actually eat you anyway because they don't care about you. They're just tired of you being there. You'd be the worst meat mech on the planet, so I guess I wouldn't mind it for the days when, you know, you have to go work customer service and you have to deal with people or whatever else it is. I mean, you just kind of blank out for a while, you know? As it evolves into Tentacruel, we have a much more dangerous creature on our hands. It has a total of 80 tentacles, which it can readily extend during hunts to ensnare its prey in a net-like shape before mobilizing it with poison. The tentacles can grow or shrink with ease. Its tentacles can absorb water to stretch even further. And most of the tentacles are hidden and kept short, leaving up to 14 exposed at all times. However, it tends to lose tentacles as it ages. While Tentacruel are rarely seen, they can gather in large groups, which scares away any nearby fish Pokemon. By the way, with those 80 tentacles, it is said that if you notice there are no fish in the area, they might not have just scared the fish away, they might have actually just eaten every single fish in the vicinity. Or really any other creature for that matter. The good thing though is that they aren't necessarily aggressive towards humans, as they won't actively come after us on the land. Though if you were to try to make, I don't know, say an entire resort in their territorial waters like people did in the anime, then they will not hesitate to rise up and tear everything down. Look, all I'm saying is I have 2 arms, 2 legs, it has 80 tentacles, so I'm staying away. More limbs and being bigger than me means that it is always going to win. And yeah, sure, it's only 5'3" and I'm 5'6". Sure, it's a little shorter than me, but it is wide. I am nowhere near as wide as it is, so I personally stand 0% chance whatsoever, and that's assuming that I even see it before it grabs me because it camouflages with the water. Now, before we continue, I do want to say thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure that you subscribe. And if you would like to go the extra mile, become a member of the channel for $3 a month. You get early videos, you get to see behind the scenes content, and it helps support a small channel that wants to make really big content that other people aren't creating. So, once again though, thank you so much for watching, and on with the video. Now, along the coast, you'll find yourself coming across a Slowpoke or Slowbro. Both of them are fairly tame, honestly. Slowpoke might even take an entire day before they realize that their tail has been bitten or damaged or anything along those lines. Meanwhile, Slowbro really isn't any smarter. It is just motivated by the pain of the Shelter biting onto its tail. I still wouldn't mess with Slowbro though. It'll just flatten you with psychic brain power. And we might as well talk about Shelter and Cloyster, considering that Shelter is what makes Slowpoke evolve into Slowbro. Now, Shelter can make pearls, it can swim fast, it can use its own tongue to lure or tempt prey into biting it. And then when that happens, it opens up and bites down that unsuspecting prey. So don't go pulling on their tongues. Pretty fair and simple. Not a sentence I thought I'd be saying anytime in my life, but here we are. Even if you do though, assuming your hand doesn't go bye-bye, it will only clamp onto something as a last resort, considering doing so actually exposes its soft innards and puts it at risk. So if you could somehow grab the back of it and punch your hand further in, maybe you'll make it out alive. Well, you'll probably make it out alive, assuming you don't bleed out from the limb loss. Why? I don't need to be talking about that. Cloyster, on the other hand, can take a bomb blast from a missile strike and be unharmed. I just wanted to open up with that just in case you thought that you could take this nearly 5-foot tall Pokemon head on. And once it does close that shell, it is impossible to pry open. Cloyster typically only opens its shell to attack an opponent, however, it is fully capable of retaliating against any enemy with its shell tightly closed. So it has this perfect defense while smacking the life out of you anyway. And with rapid succession, it launches its spikes at the foe, keeping them repelled. The same projectile system it uses to launch its spikes is also used for swimming. It swallows seawater and then ejects it towards the rear, pushing it through with siphon jet propulsion. It has booty spikes that it's shooting at you. Being the result of Shelter evolving to an evolution stone, it is at least rarely found in the wild, though they can be found on the sea floor, nestled among the rocks and coral. However, it will actively go onto land to hunt for Slowpoke tails. So once more, for the people in the back, do not antagonize the Pokemon or you will be gored through the chest. Now, on the surface, our next entries don't really seem all that very dangerous with how friendly they are, but if angered or desperate, it'll become very clear who would win in the water, especially if you are somehow making the mistake of entering the water in Arctic lands in which Seal and Dugong resided. Their real-life counterparts will at least be very weary of us, basically demanding respect and rarely, if ever, attacking in the wild. So that's a plus, but if you hurt them, you're not going to make it very far. More specifically, if we look at Dugong, we have much more to respect. It stores thermal energy within its body, and that also allows it to be completely unharmed by even the most intense freezing water. During daylight hours, it sleeps on bitterly cold ice or under shallow water. However, at night, when the temperature drops, it becomes a hunter and searches for prey such as Wishy-Washy. Following a meal, it sunbathes on the beach, which raises its body temperature and aids in digestion. This is just a real-life seal, honestly. That's just what they do. It's facts. I mean, with some animals, you could have inches, if not feet, of just pure fat insulating their bodies to help them survive these cold, cold climates. And it's amazing. It's so cool. I highly recommend watching some documentaries out there after you watch every video that I have. Now, they also swim at a speed of 8 knots, which translates to about 9 miles per hour, and, you know, it kind of helps having a very hydrodynamic body. We do have a very aggressive beachgoer in the form of Krabby and also Kingler. In the wild, Krabby lives near the edge of water in both fresh and salt water. Krabby is most commonly found on beaches where it burrows in the sand, and in times of scarce food sources, it may eat sand to regain nutrients and will be very aggressive in defending its home. Yes, there are crabs that do that. There are microorganisms that are within the sand that, as they just scoop it all into their mouth, they're pretty good to go if they absolutely have to do that. Its main form of defense is creating foam to shroud its body in order to confuse opponents into thinking it's bigger than it actually is. Again, crabs might do this, but based on what I could find, crabs will primarily do this when they're running out of oxygen, so they kind of bubble up. As seen in Pokemon This Series episode Mystery at the Lighthouse, Krabby generally keeps to itself but will quickly defend itself if provoked. So, at least we don't have much to worry about there, unless you're being a little bit more desperate for food and you decide to, again, walk into their territory. A lot of Pokemon seem to be very territorial, and it's just kind of a common thing with any animal, to be entirely fair. Though the real problem is Kingler between these two. Kingler is often found on the edges of water, usually the ocean. Its powerful claws have 10,000 horsepower and are capable of prying open the shells of Shellder and Oyster. While Kingler's large left claw is its main tool for offensive maneuvers, it is so large and heavy that Kingler can barely lift it. It causes bouncing problems, and it may quickly become fatigued from continuous use. However, it has been shown to communicate with other Kingler by waving its pincers around. Wave them around like you just don't care. Put your claws up in the air. So it is shown that they can be a little bit more aggressive, at least in anime, and I don't know about you, but I don't have 10,000 horsepower grip or a shell stronger than Diamond to protect me. So, to put all of that into better perspective, 1 horsepower can move approximately 550 pounds a singular foot every second. So again, 550 pounds, 1 foot, 1 second. That's the power that it has. So in this case, Kingler can move 5,500,000 pounds a whole foot in 1 second. Your average school bus weighs 15,000 pounds. So, theoretically speaking, if it doesn't tire itself out, it could move 366 school buses with its one arm a whole foot in a singular second. 1! Have I said the number 1 enough for you today? Though to be fair, that is with its one claw, and that does tire it out fairly quickly. But if it hits you with it, you're becoming a fine mist. There's nothing that's going to be left behind. Honestly, with that level of force, you're probably getting cooked. Kingler, how many hits from a Kingler does it take to cook a person? Let's say you decide to swim out into the ocean, maybe check out some coral reefs and see the wildlife there and meet some seahorses. Horsey, in that case, might be a real nice Pokemon on the surface and eat plenty of moss and bugs, but scare it and it's going to release an entire mass of ink to blind you. Not that big of a deal. Octopus, they do that. Why not? That's not enough. Whatever. Though, if it gets too happy, that's where it actually gets scary, because you will become in trouble, as Horsey likes to do a funny little dance where it swims in circles with its kind and summon entire whirlpools. Though, at least they're not all that strong yet. Though, by the time it would evolve into Seadra, you best stay away from its home unless you want trouble. Because, sure, typically, seahorses aren't very strong swimmers, and Seadra is slowly changing that and evolving to swim better. In addition, Seadra has not only poisonous fins, but will actively create large whirlpools that will wear down the endurance of their prey before swallowing them whole. It's like a freaking snake. Seadra is also just shy of being 4 feet tall, so maybe we'll be safe from being eaten whole because, the big old tube mouth that it has. But they are still territorial creatures that will aggressively attack. And I don't think I can swim my way out of a whirlpool. And to really exemplify this, I read directly from their info. It is markedly vicious and will mercilessly attack those who venture near its nest. During this time, the male's venom also becomes thicker and stronger than usual. So stay very far away during mating season, whatever that is. How about we move on from that, though? Because, I'd rather not get stung, trapped in a whirlpool, and then swallowed whole by this Pokemon, by whatever gluttonous Seadra that might exist. So let's move on to Starfish, as they might bide their time just waiting for one unfortunate crab or fish or whatever to come on by and then completely envelop their entire prey before spitting out their stomachs from their body to cover their prey further and digest them from the outside of their body. Staryu and Starmie are at least nothing like that, actually. We have a very safe Pokemon. In fact, we at least know that Starmie only eats plankton as it spins throughout the open waters. In fact, Staryu is so docile it just lets Pokemon such as Luminion eat their body as long as they don't eat their core. Well, at least until it evolves into Starmie, then it begins to fight back. It's like, I don't need to bide my time anymore. I'm getting my revenge. Otherwise, again, just don't touch their core, and I guess you could eat the arms of Staryu all you want, which I didn't realize it, but people do eat starfish. It's a delicacy in some places, and then it's a street food in others, primarily looking at like Chinese or Japanese dishes. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I kept finding source after source after source of that, and it's just, I have gone 26 years of my life without ever hearing that, and I love sushi, I love seafood, and it just somehow all feels a little bit weirder to me than knowing that people will eat guinea pigs. Is that wrong? Is it weird that I think that that's weirder than eating guinea pigs? That fascinates me still. Like, populations and animals and how, oh, because there's less of this animal and more of this animal and it's easier to raise, we just decided to eat this to survive off of. And it just ends up boiling down to, oh, guinea pigs instead of rabbits. Anywho, Magikarp. Do I really need to explain Magikarp? Heavily underestimated Pokemon that are way more powerful than we ever give them credit for, and I guarantee a Magikarp could destroy you, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your uncle, your best friend, your best friend's best friend, because it's not you right now, because you decided to eat their spaghetti in place of eating just your own food. I don't know, man. I'm going off on a tangent. Let's just start with the information from that speed video that I mentioned and get back on track. Using the equation for vertical jump height, we rearrange it to solve for initial velocity, and we can now use the new formula for Pokemon that have a jumping height as long as we convert everything to meters before plugging it into the equation and spitting out the answers we need. In this case, if Magikarp jumps 8 feet into the air from flat standing, it would have an initial velocity of 6.91 meters per second, or roughly 24.88 kilometers an hour, which is 15.46 miles per hour. This does not, account for wind resistance or size or anything like that, but it gives us a very good idea in the most ideal of situations. Now, let's take the Magikarp jumping contest into consideration. The event in which both in the games and the anime we have seen Magikarp jump into space and then survive the fall back down to Earth. In order to break free of Earth's gravity, you need to be moving at a velocity of roughly 25,000 miles per hour. That is not taking into account the sheer distance from the ground all the way into space, meaning that Magikarp has to overcome far more in order to even reach that point and still have that much speed to break from gravity. So what am I saying? I'm saying that if Magikarp were to use the energy needed to go from the ground to space to jump the, at most, 6 feet it takes to get to your face, it doesn't even have to hit your face, it might hit your stomach, it does not matter. The resulting impact would be stronger than the Fat Man Bomb. You would be obliterated by Magikarp. You are no better than Yamcha in Dragon Ball Z. That is it. You're gone. There won't be a body left. Fat Man Bomb Magikarp. Now, even if it only jumped 1,000 feet, okay, let's say it jumped 1,000 feet. It's your average Magikarp. You know, the minimum height for a mountain. They jump over it often. It has to have an initial velocity of 278 kilometers an hour, or 172 miles per hour. That might not be enough to blast through you, considering Magikarp's size and the way that that impact would be spread across you at that point, but your bones are definitely getting shattered. They might even be jellied at that point. I don't really think so, but it's fun to think of jellied bones for some reason after a Magikarp hits me. Though, to be fair, this all is assuming that the Magikarp is actually paying enough attention to launch itself at you. Then again, though, if you've ever held a fish, they kind of like flop all over the place without even thinking, and they hurt. When they slap you, it hurts. So all it takes is one wrong move, and you're a goner. And of course, we have its evolution, Gyarados. Considered a deity of destruction since ancient times, Hyper Beam is often associated with Gyarados as it matches the level of power and destruction that Gyarados brings to the table. It can rampage in any weather, will rampage up to an entire month, and will not stop until literally everything is reduced to nothing. And it's all thought to be due to the chemical reaction that occurs in the brain of Magikarp as it evolves, causing the naturally vicious nature of Gyarados. Of course, though, when it is trained correctly, such as by Gym Leader Misty, it's been shown that Gyarados can be tamed. But this is the wild, and even in episode 1 of the original animated series, we see Gyarados is chasing Ash after he goes over a waterfall. Long story short, Gyarados is going to get you whether you like it or not, whether in your water or not. You could be climbing a mountain, and it just, the sea serpent decides, today seems like a great day to fly through the air. Vroom, goes through the air, snaps you up, no different than a seagull would a hot dog, and you're gone. So, yes, very terrifying, and they could be far more common if Magikarp just evolved more often, but they just kind of float around and bottom feed. While we're on the topic of common fish, we might as well talk about the fancy tail in the room with Goldeen and Sea King. They are fairly aggressive, actually, in territorial Pokemon, at least Goldeen is, as it has a wild temperament and will use its horn to smash its way to freedom if kept in an aquarium. Independent woman don't need no man, you can't hold her down. It competes with others of its kind to determine which has the strongest, thickest horn. Humans swimming near it must exercise caution lest Goldeen rams them. And it is a very common sight in any body of fresh water, including ponds, lakes, and rivers. It can be seen swimming upstream in large schools during the breeding season in spring. Its strong fins allow it to maintain a steady speed of 5 knots while swimming upstream. It is known as the water dancer due to its elegant movements in the water. So even if it was being nice to you, if you're swimming anywhere near it and it allows you, there's a good chance that it just turns around and pierces you with its horn just because it no longer wants to be near you whatsoever. Though when it comes to Sea King, in the first time that we've been talking about evolutions being more or less aggressive, we actually have a less aggressive evolution. They're primarily protective of their eggs and homes during the mating season, but otherwise aren't much to worry about as long as you do not threaten them. Now, with them becoming more docile, that's great, but if you decide to test your luck, remember, they bore holes through boulders to lay their eggs, and your body is definitely not tougher than a boulder. Also, every single time I say boulder, I think of the boulder from Avatar: The Last Airbender. In the past, Lapras would have been a much rarer sight. Nowadays, though, the living fairy is in high numbers and actually threatens the fish populations due to just how much they eat and how many there are. Lapras is a gentle, helpful Pokemon that enjoys ferrying people across bodies of water. In the past, its docility made it an easy target for hunters, and it was driven to near extinction. So, this Pokemon is so loving and gentle that it just about died out of pure politeness. Now, before you make the, haha, Lapras is Canadian joke, remember, all of the Canadian anger goes into their task force and into their geese. I would not, nope, I'm good. I don't want to know what evil Lapras would look like. They aren't pushovers, and, I mean, yeah, sure, people hunt them, but I don't recommend hunting them, as I just about guarantee these Pokemon originally would be more likely to save you than they are to hurt you, but because they know exactly how to save you, they know exactly how to make you hurt the most. So just let them live. Let them be happy little shelled plesiosaurs like they are. Vaporeon can actually be found in the wild, just like any other evolution stone using Pokemon, though, as always, they are rare. And in this case, pretty inconsequential. Sure, the entire bodily makeup of it is basically water, which allows them to basically dissolve into water in the coolest way I only see in one instance of the entire anime, at least that I've found, but they do this to simply ambush their prey. Fish. meaning you're safe and you can enjoy the presence of the dog, fox, cat, mermaid from a distance. Now, while they aren't actually naturally found in Kanto, we will make it an exception for ammonites, as it can be found in the wild of the Giant's Foot location within Galar. Though this is because people are releasing them into the wild after revival, making them a pretty big problem considering that they would not have any natural predators, making them an invasive species, but not because of location, but through time. Interesting. Ammonite, though, just likes to swim throughout the seas, feed on plankton, which, once again, is going to drive me insane, because do you understand the number of times that plankton is brought up within the Pokedex, and yet we don't have a plankton Pokemon? You know that Wishy-Washy should have, in my opinion, been a plankton. No shade on Wishy-Washy, though. I mean, I'll say they are pretty cool and pretty terrifying, and we'll talk about them later, but plankton! We could have had plankton! Omastar was believed to have gone extinct because its shell became too heavy for it to swim. That should not be funny to me. Though that didn't stop it from eating Shelter. All it had to do was wait for Shelter or any other prey to get close enough, then it would strike with its tentacles, bite down with its beak that could break through boulders, because every Pokemon can break through boulders or diamond or whatever, and suck out the insides. I don't want to know what that would feel like if it were to bite onto my skull. And considering that it was over 3 feet tall, I really don't want to find that out on a personal level. I doubt it would. I mean, maybe it was an opportunistic predator, considering the fact that it was, you know, running low on food options because it couldn't swim around as much. But, like, it just seems like if it needed to, and it was cornered and didn't really have much food, it would not hesitate to fight us. There is always the chance that it would attack and suck out my brain like a D&D octopus monster man. Kabuto aren't that much of a big deal. They're horseshoe crabs that have a few populations here or there that have gone unchanged over the course of 300 million years. That, though, does make me wonder, like, it's never mentioned, but horseshoe crabs in real life, they have their blue blood, and that blood is then carefully taken, and they're finding ways to take it very, very safely without hurting the horseshoe crab, and trying to synthesize new stuff that would allow them to not take that blood from the horseshoe crabs. But, like, if Kabuto is a horseshoe crab, which it is, why haven't we gotten a mention of its blood or DNA or whatever they want to in the Pokemon world being used to synthesize new medications or antibodies or vaccines or whatever the heck else you want to say, right? Because we get that from, again, real life horseshoe crabs. And you could say, oh, well, that's because they have, like, their free healthcare, you're good to go. But think about the Ampharos at Olivine Lighthouse that got sick and needed an herbal remedy, like actual physical medicine to get better. You couldn't put it into a Pokeball Poke Center, bing bong bong bing, and you're good to go. No, it had to actually be healed through traditional methods. So again, just very curious about how all of that works, honestly. Maybe one day I'll do a whole video on the medical world of Pokemon, because I'm very curious as to how all of this works. Now, the real issue, as always, is when Kabuto evolves into Kabutops. You see, Kabutops is likely based on the sea scorpion that people thought was a horseshoe crab back in the day, because they shared such similar resemblance to each other. Sea scorpions typically did not look so close to horseshoe crabs and were incredible hunters, and our Kabutops here makes them proud, as it too was one of the greatest apex predators of the past. Before it went extinct, Kabutops was in the process of evolving into a land dweller, as evidenced by changes in its gills and legs. This change is thought to be due to its prey moving onto land as well. One of the few instances that we have actual evolution, not Pokemon evolution, which is just metamorphosis. Though, in other words, I want you to imagine prey adapting onto land and Kabutops saying, Mama didn't raise no wimp, and just starting to chase prey onto the land. Of course, this isn't exactly how it went. What likely happened is that as the prey adapted and changed so that way they could go onto land, Kabuto would eventually be doing the same alongside them, as Kabutops is smack dab in the middle of whatever that final evolution could have been. And before someone says it, they are not related to Scyther despite their visual similarities. That's just external pressures bringing about the same characteristics as we would see in Diglett and Wiglett, for example. In its ocean home, Kabutops could tuck up its limbs to help it swim extremely fast, going up to roughly 29 knots, 33 miles per hour. Kabuto is swimming at road speeds. It is not legal for Kabutops to be swimming through a school zone at this point. I'll pass. I'm good. I'm staying out of the waters. I don't want to die. Now, it did use its sharp sides to slice enemies and drink their internal fluids. Any leftovers left behind by Kabutops are consumed by other Pokemon. It is unknown what led to Kabutops' extinction. So either the world got hit by a meteor, Koraidon was one of the great extinction events, alongside some of the other Paradox Pokemon, at least in another timeline, or there's something much larger out there in the prehistoric waters that would decimate this Pokemon at some point. Not unheard of, to be entirely fair. Honestly, the only thing I could imagine hunting down a sea scorpion would be another larger, more powerful sea scorpion of some sorts. It just didn't really live around the same time as other larger or faster sea creatures in general, but there's nothing to say we can't have a big old nasty water Pokemon that was at the tippity top of the pecking order. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, that's all the water types Kanto. We can move on to Johto. Wrong! Oh, so very wrong! Because there is one extra lovable looking Pokemon that will absolutely eviscerate you if you decide to mess with its home in the waters. Because after it survives long enough through eating whatever falls to the bottom of the water they reside in as Dratini, then growing through the power that is stored within the orb on their neck as a Dragonair, we arrive with the massive and powerful Dragonite. Now, normally I wouldn't see them as a threat unless you disturbed what they love. The problem then is, what if they have something that you want, even if it wouldn't be destroying their home? Well, that doesn't matter, because anger a Dragonite and it will go on a rampage until whatever angered them and threatened their home is gone. The greatest example of this is actually in the Pokemon Adventures manga when Red is searching for the Surf HM, and after finding it, Dragonite appears as its massive size is just able to shift the water too much for Red and his Pokemon to even swim within the vicinity of. A big fight ensues between it and Snorlax, which is just a stunning kaiju battle, only for the Dragonite to realize that Red is going after the HM in the water. It looks at him, looks at the HM, and just sends out that Hyper Beam and destroys the HM. So, not only is it powerful, they are intelligent and potentially even spiteful. If you want it, you're not allowed to have it because you disturbed my home. So, again, don't mess with their territory at all, and hopefully you will still get saved by one if you are ever drowning in the middle of the ocean somewhere. So, Kanto feels like a bit of a bust. Most of the Pokemon there will absolutely flatten us without a second thought if we were to enter their territory, let alone if we enter their line of sight. And while many of those Pokemon will still be found within the watery regions of Johto, how about we move our way over there anyway and see how we do? The first duo of new water dwellers we find in the wild east of Pokemon is actually Wooper and Quagsire. Now, Wooper's absolutely adorable. It gets to simply live its happy little life without its arms, plip, plap, plip, plap, as it goes along the ground. It hides in the sediment of streams underwater to sleep, and then comes out to hunt. Hunt what, you may ask? Well, I found out during my ecology series, which you should absolutely go watch that, as I have gone through Unova at this point, that Wooper and Quagsire primarily exist on routes where we find our snake or rodents Pokemon on land, and that Japanese giant salamanders absolutely eat those animals, meaning that since our Wooper and Quagsire are based on the Japanese giant salamander, meaning that our Wooper and Quagsire are not nearly as innocent as they look. But how could you stay mad at such great faces? Now, at least with Quagsire, even though it is absolutely large enough to swallow us whole, it is likely very uninterested. It will often just wait for some unsuspecting prey to fall into its mouth as it sits perfectly still in the water. Because of this, it can just go on for an incredibly long time without eating. Because it's using so little energy, its metabolism is likely much slower, meaning it can afford to just wait. Or eat literally anything that comes to it. Jellyfish, snakes that might fall into the water, Magikarp, which, I don't know, might not be all that nutritious, but nevertheless, it doesn't have to worry. Now, we do see it wandering around on land in caves or swamps, as its skin won't dry out with all the moisture in the air. In the end, I think that we might actually be safe from this one, dear viewer. Now, we can add Politoed into the mix as well now, though the worst thing that it does is scream at the top of its lungs at night under the full moon with the choir of its own kind. They think it sounds beautiful, meanwhile to us, and according to the Pokédex, it just sounds like very angry yelling, which will never not be funny to me. I mean, can you just imagine? Honey, can you hand me the earplugs? It's the Politoads again. So unless you think that they'd kill you through sleep deprivation, you're likely going to be just fine. Slowking is also here, and once again we have a Pokemon that is more focused on surviving and helping its own kind rather than trying to harm others. It uses its intelligence for good, unless we talked about the Galarian one, which that's a war criminal, but we'll talk about that later. For now, though, know that as long as you don't wear the brain-biting Shelter crown, you have nothing to fear. It's more likely that the Slowking will end up dying before you, as the more intelligent it is, the more venom is actually seeping into its brain from the mixture of it and Shelter's chemicals. Maybe one day I might have to explain, like a whole video on the brains of other Pokemon and how they work. That'd be really fun, actually. Marill and Azumarill are also fairly safe to be around as well. They're basically just blue rabbits things. I mean, I guess Marill is more of a mouse, but whatever. That loves to fish for their food and have fur that is so water repellent it defies the laws of physics and allows them to swim in rushing tides without any resistance whatsoever. In addition, at least Azumarill may be nice enough to save you from drowning, since it does save other Pokemon from drowning. Not gonna lie, if we ignore all the other Pokemon that are originally from Kanto, Johto is actually seeming pretty nice right now. I've gone from, I am vastly terrified of all water, to, okay, there's some scary monsters here, but at least I can find comfort knowing that there are a lot more nice Pokemon on the mainlands, not on the outer lands of water and ocean, that might actually save me. Quillfish is literally just a puffer fish, except arguably stronger, as it will inflate itself and then fire off its poisonous quills. If that poison is even remotely as dangerous as a real-life puffer fish, or worse, then oh boy, you are likely going to die very, very quickly, and there's no way of saving you. Or at least, you might go on one heck of a trip like dolphins love to. And if you're too much of a threat and keep pursuing, they're just going to release a bunch of water and phew, away at high speed. So they aren't really worth trying to hunt. Back to a friendlier Pokemon with Corsola, who has slowly made their way into my heart with all of its teeter-tottering waddling that it likes to move around with. Almost called it a living coral, but coral is already living after all, so that would have been incredibly redundant as saying, let's say, chai tea or non-bread. So why don't we take a quick tangent to tell you about coral, because Corsola is a non-threat and deserves to be loved with everyone's entire heart. According to NOAA, corals are sessile. Sessile? It's a word. Which means that they permanently attach themselves to the ocean floor, essentially taking root like most plants do. We certainly cannot recognize them by their faces or other distinct body parts as we can most animals, so what exactly are corals? Corals actually comprise an ancient and unique partnership called symbiosis that benefits both animal and plant life in the ocean. Corals are animals though, because they do not make their own food as plants do. Corals have tiny, tentacle-like arms that they use to capture their food from the water and sweep into their inscrutable mouths. Most structures that we call coral are in fact made up of hundreds to thousands of tiny coral creatures called polyps. Each soft-bodied polyp, most no thicker than a nickel, secretes a hard outer skeleton of limestone, calcium carbonate, that attaches either to rock or the dead skeletons of other polyps. My home is built on the home and skeleton of my family. Pretty creepy if you think about it too much, but also really cool. If Corsola is ever chased down by someone or something, it will break off its own branches in order to escape. Pretty metal. It does need clean water in order to survive, otherwise that's basically how we get its Galarian variant that we'll mention later. Up next, we have the Sniper of the Seas in the form of Remoraid, which really isn't a threat to us, actually. Yeah, it can shoot water 300 feet away to knock down bugs from the air or even Burmy from branches, but they're not interested in us. I mean, they're no different than the sniper fish that we have in real life. The one I would be marginally more concerned about is Octillery if you decided to bother it. Octillery is a relaxed Pokemon who loves fuss from its trainer. Even though it's more docile when domesticated, it can be very stubborn at times in the wild. It instinctively sneaks into rocky holes or pots, and if it gets sleepy, it steals the nest of a fellow Octillery. When threatened, it will spurt ink from its mouth to cover itself before escaping, allowing it to protect itself and its young from danger. Octillery's ink obscures vision and contains substances that dull predators' sense of smell. Octillery also uses this ink on its prey before its suction cups hold the prey tightly. Its ink can also be used as a cooking ingredient. Besides ink, Octillery sometimes uses its rock-hard head on its foes. Long story short, don't mess with Octillery, as it is the Tanjiro of the Seas. You can use your Breath no Jutsu all you want, but it is more powerful than a freaking headbutt from an anime protagonist, which is why Octillery has decided to hijack your entire life story and become the leading role to headbutt you into the Shadow Realm. And I don't know what happened there. I feel like a spirit took over me, and it was a very weeby spirit, but it was there, and we're gonna move on. Chinchou and Lantern are a very, very interesting case, actually. They are based on the football fish, considering their shape, and their wonderful little lantern that they have, that most anglerfish are known to have. The big difference, though, is that while Chinchou is adorable, it'll run across land with its tiny little feet, it'll shock its surroundings as well with pure, unregulated energy or electricity. It'll just have so much electricity uncontrolled and built up in its body that even it starts to feel tingly. And the only warning you get is when it is near and it has that light that it constantly emits. Then if we look at Lantern, it is more than just a living flashbang. Inside its orbs are bacteria that produce light by absorbing Lantern's bodily fluids. It lures prey using the glow, then blinds them by using an intense flash before it swallows them whole. The flash it creates is visible on the surface from a depth of over 3 miles, 5 kilometers. This has earned it the nickname, the Deep Sea Star. I don't know, I want a Western under the water where Lantern is a sheriff or like whatever else. I want him to be or her, whatever. The Deep Sea Stars, come on in. Now, Lantern competes with Luminian when catching its prey, Starmie. Frillish and Sharpedo are natural predators of Lantern, and Lantern inhabits the depths of the ocean. So, let's put something into perspective here. Natural light stops at about 1 kilometer into the water. Here, there is no light visible whatsoever. So, what you're telling me is that this funny little fish can produce enough light 5 entire kilometers deep into the ocean, which can be seen on the surface. Mind you, theoretically, by even just 1,000 meters away, we should only be seeing 1% of the light that this Pokemon is producing. Now, this isn't just some simple ratio that we can plug this into where it's like, oh, every 10 meters we lose X amount of light. No. There are far too many factors that go into this, such as not just depth, but what is in the water, and so on and so forth. So, this ultimately means, despite all that, that Lantern is creating a flash of light so immensely powerful that because it is deep in the water, where there is a ton of immense crushing pressure, followed up by releasing this sudden burst of light, which escapes in the form of heat and energy that is incredibly intense, that Lantern could theoretically create a black hole at any time at random. Because again, the whole idea is lots of energy in incredibly dense space can theoretically create a black hole. Not just through light, again, by energy, and density, and a bunch of other mixtures that go into it. That's why it's theoretical. Long story short, either you are getting blinded or sucked into a black hole by a lantern. But hey, at least it's not specifically hunting you down, right? The last Pokemon to actually watch out for in Johto is Kingdra, the seahorse that lived 1,000 years to become a dragon, and yes, that is part of the old lore as to why Horsey eventually becomes a dragon type. The yawning of Sleeping Seadra is so powerful that it can create undercurrents capable of destroying small ships. Should it decide to emerge from the depths of the ocean, Kingdra's strength can create large whirlpools and waterspouts on the surface. Because of its immense power, it often hibernates deep in uninhabited areas of the sea to build up its energy, usually at the bottoms of seas. When a storm arrives, Kingdra is said to awaken and wander about in search of prey. Its awakening can cause tornadoes. Literally, it just waking up causes tornadoes. How is Johto in one piece? Don't go on the water. We'll come back. It's okay. I'll contain myself. It is known to have fierce battles with Dragonite whenever they meet. That is, of course, based on the Eastern Dragon of the Sea, and, I mean, just other dragons in general at that point, and they do have conflicting natures, considering Dragonite does like to save people who are drowning. Now, Kingdra's gleaming scales are also gifted to royals. Kingdra could be nowhere near you, and through simply going to the surface, by breathing, that is all it really needs to do, something that it does automatically, to sink ships, to cause tornadoes. We don't even know the category of tornado, but even a category 1 is more than enough if you're just out there on the water to put your life in incredible danger. We are lucky that there are not hundreds of these Pokemon all over the sea, because otherwise it would be a constant turmoil of biblical proportions. So, Johto is technically just as bad as Kanto, who would have guessed? So stepping into the waters in this whole section of the world is a no-go, as it's just a coin flip as to whether you'll see the next day or not. So how about we take our shot at a place where if we were to have a map of it and throw a dart, there'd be a 50-50 shot if we'd land in water or land as we talk about Hoenn next. The Lotad line is a bunch of happy little softies. Lotad ferries other Pokemon across the water while eating little weeds. Lombre sticks to the herbivorous diet despite its Kappa inspirations, and oh my goodness, they eat people. And then Ludicolo dances till it can't no more since its body is fueled with energy through the sound of music. Seriously though, they are an incredibly passive species outside of Lombre playing pranks on people and throwing their lures back into their boats. Wingull and Pelipper are fairly docile as well. Wingull is going to eat everything that it can, snap its beak around as long as it doesn't get shocked by an electric Pokemon. And Pelipper is diving down to scoop up all sorts of creatures in that big bill that it does have. This ranges from fish to mammals and more, as pelicans are sometimes apt to devour more than just fish. Just don't leave your kids or small dogs unattended, as Pelipper it might accidentally eat them, or maybe it'll get desperate for food in a very unlikely scenario. Otherwise, they're nothing to truly worry about either. Surskit and Masquerain are pretty tame as well, with Surskit being a water strider and Masquerain getting big ol' antennae to scare away predators. It really just goes after plants a little bit, and more aptly or more often, bugs, while also potentially being a little bit of a decomposer, of course. All these Pokemon are actually pretty common as well throughout Hoenn, and it's making Hoenn sound incredibly nice right about now. Sure, you have Goldeen, Tentacool, and Magikarp lines here, but they aren't too hard to avoid, and Magikarp typically isn't going to just evolve its Gyarados in small ponds where they're not threatened. Azurill is also here. It is more focused on ensuring that the ball of nutrition on its tail isn't stolen, although despite that, I find it really funny that it will shot put itself after swinging around a couple of times and throw itself into the distance if, you do threaten it at all in order for it to escape. Now, of course, once we reach the streams and the ocean itself, we do have threats in Carvanha and Sharpedo. Carvanha, unlike real piranhas, are incredibly aggressive and will attack pretty much anything viciously. It has powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth that are able to chew through solid steel, rip up boat hulls, and rip wooden boats to pieces. As a result, sailors avoid getting their boats dented by it at all costs. Carvanha has been responsible for the destruction of many boats that come into contact with it. They mercilessly swarm any intruder and prey that invades their territory, but they become timid when alone. It only attacks when in a group of 5 or more, becoming instantly vicious. Carvanha is drawn towards the scent of blood. It lives in rivers that course through the jungles, as well as temperate regions. Each Carvanha school has its own territory, and it competes with Basculin, which is not here, for food. Carvanha is just basically every piranha that's ever been in a movie whatsoever, just in real life. Nothing much left to the imagination here, and then it decides to become Sharpedo. It is feared and known by many names. Bully of the Sea, Ruffian of the Sea, Bandit of the Sea, or Gangster of the Sea as a group due to its sharp teeth. They will chew through iron and steel, and while they can't swim at high speeds for long, it can still swim at speeds of up to 80 miles per hour. It is very sensitive to the scent of blood. It lives in the sea and is known to prey on whalmer, particularly small ones. It also preys on other water-type Pokemon such as Finian, Leminian, Lantern, and Squirtle even. Now, you could be out at sea and you would just wake up in heaven like, what just happened? Oh yeah, you were eaten by a Sharpedo. It basically shredded you immediately upon impact as it had its mouth open. They're incredibly efficient at these things, and they really don't need to chew, it feels like. But again, I can deal with that. Just don't swim in the ocean, it'll be perfectly fine. It's honestly not all that different from real life, or you don't want to go into certain waters. Not a big deal. Whalmer and Whale Lord aren't really much of a threat either. They're just super powered baleen whales. The only things I would be concerned about is, I don't know, maybe they'd be more likely, or at least Whale Lord would be relatively likely to accidentally eat me if it's not paying attention as to where it decided to breach the water and open its mouth, which it primarily, once again, eats plankton, which drives me insane. I will never rest in the afterlife if in my lifetime I never see a plankton Pokemon. Please, please, Game Freak, I need it. If you head to the swamps or anywhere else where the water is a little bit more mucky, you'll come into contact with the catfish that is Barboach. They're gonna dig up bugs and continue to taste the entire world around them through their skin, but otherwise aren't really a threat. The problem here, though, is when it evolves into Wishcash, because while the giant catfish is just going to sit at the bottom of the pond and wait for prey to come to it, it's also going to cause earthquakes whenever it feels like it in order to scare away any other predators that might go near it. These same earthquakes could absolutely ruin infrastructure within cities nearby and just cause them to collapse. So if you move to Hoenn, maybe don't live near the scary ponds or caves where these Pokemon reside. And speaking of living in Hoenn, I actually, this whole video made me want to cover a whole other video about what region would be the best one to live in based on a number of different factors. I'm adding that to the list because I think it'd be really fun to just cover. Corfish just live wherever they want since they're hardy enough to even live in polluted waters, heavily polluted waters. They'll also eat whatever they can that enters the water, but they're not as much of a massive threat to us. What would be a potential threat is when it evolves into Crawdaunt, which is such a bully that it will throw every Pokemon out of the water that lives in it, or at least eat them. The only exception is actually Feebas, which for some reason I could not quite figure out. It could be because Feebas is considered to be a shabby Pokemon in color and it doesn't notice them, but I don't really think that's the case because it seems like they actually cohabitate areas together. Meanwhile, Magikarp still gets the boot. But Corfish and Crawdaunt aren't even remotely afraid of Basculin, though the only time that they are afraid is when their pincers molt and fall off. But when they grow back, they're ready to brawl once more. So just more territorial Pokemon, no big deal, just stay away from their ponds. At that same line of thought, Feebas is really no threat whatsoever. They just sadly exist until the day that they evolve, bottom feeding until the fateful day. Though you better hope that if you're ever in danger, there's a melodic here nearby to save you. When there are fights going on, it has the power to calm angry feelings and end arguments by releasing a wave of energy. In addition, it can move by floating in the air, as shown in the 12th Pokemon movie. It lives at the bottom of large lakes. So not only would you be graced by their beauty and their scales, as they are said to have a different array of colors depending on how the light shines on them, but you would also essentially be safe. Hello, Arthomio class SCP. This Spheal line here gets a little bit scary because while Spheal is docile and may leave us alone, maybe even roll away to safety as shown through Pokemon Legends Arceus, once it starts to evolve, it can become just as territorial and aggressive as its real-life walrus counterparts. The Spheal are the scouts who will then report back to its evolved forms. Celio can sense the environment even when it sleeps. It has also been known to roll Spheal or Pokeballs on its nose, and the reason Celio does this to Spheal is to check its scent and ensure that it's still healthy. This Pokemon lives in the sea and drift ice. Celio dives underwater to hunt for prey 5 times a day. It searches for the prey by scent. And then there's the Walrein. Walrein lives in and around icy seas where it is insulated against the cold by its thick layer of blubber. This layer of fat also protects it from enemy attacks by causing them to bounce off, while its long tusks are capable of crushing ice up to 10 tons in one blow. They may break during battle. Walrein's tusks grow continuously throughout its life, and any broken ones will grow back by the following year. This Pokemon can be found in herds of 20 to 30 individuals, which are fiercely protected by the leader. The leader is willing to give up its life in order to protect the herd. Look, I don't want to cross paths with him, because the last thing I need is to be frozen in place and then smashed to pieces after its slow and partially hilarious approach on land. Once again, though, they stay in cold regions where I have no intention of visiting, so I'm safe unless I randomly encounter them on the beaches of Hisui. Relicanth is millions of years old. It sticks to itself deep under the ocean where it's heavily pressurized and more comfortable, considering it reminds it likely of its old habitats where it lived long ago, so it just gets to exist freely. And so do we. Clamperl itself is also not too bad, I'll admit. I mean, it'll just clamp down on any prey, fish primarily, that do cross paths with it, and not let go until it gets to eat them. But it's really their evolutions that can naturally occur that I am far more fearful of. And all you have to do is go onto the wrong side of the region into the water to encounter one or the other. Huntail has a tail that is shaped like a fish. It uses the tail to attract prey, then swallows the prey whole with its large gaping mouths. It's a lot of teeth for something that just swallows things whole. This Pokemon swims by wriggling its slender body like a snake, so it'll be a bit more opportunistic in terms of its diet and might not actually attack us. Though on the opposite side, we have the Insanguinator that is known as Gorbis. And although Gorbis is the very picture of elegance and beauty while it's swimming according to the Pokédex and information in the Pokemon world, it is also cruel. When it spots prey, this Pokemon inserts its thin mouth into the prey's body and drains the prey of its bodily fluids. Directly from the mouth of the Pokédex itself is where that is stated. And this is why Gorbis is one of my most feared Pokemon. The little vampire of the seas will make me suffer, and it enjoys it. If I ever cross paths with it, it doesn't even want my wallet. Not that there's much money in there to begin with. No, it just wants my pain and my blood. But it's fine. To even things out a little bit more, from the terror to the happy, we have the lovely Love Disc, which is just so cute and joyous, and will be released by the hundreds in front of couples at resorts to give them a good luck charm for their relationship after they kiss. They're friendly and happy, and then even these little love discs might kiss each other and then fly off into the distance as they flutter with each other's body into the sunset. Literally, that is actually what happens. So, there, a little happy little highlights to be at least a little bit more comfortable with this region in terms of having to deal with other deep sea creatures. Now, as long as it doesn't encounter Groudon, then Kyogre is actually incredibly friendly, it turns out. It'll help people, it won't constantly expand the seas, it'll just live like the giant whale-shaped leviathan that it is. And maybe it'll seek out the unlimited supply of earth energy, primal energy from deep within the planet in order to reform back to its true origin form, and then it's kind of a toss-up as to what happens after that. Will it continue to be friendly, or will it drown the world until Rayquaza puts Kyogre down for nap time? I'd like to think that it would be a good whale until it sees Groudon, and then the entire world is in trouble. So far, it feels like, despite being the potential ground zero for the end of the world because of the literal embodiments of the Earth's core and the Earth's seas clashing every 1,000 years, which, you know, hopefully we are not in the middle or at the tail end of that when that would occur. It feels like Hoenn is a place that we could actually survive without too much fear. So how about we move on to Sinnoh? A couple of past Pokemon make their way back here. Magikarp honestly just levels the playing field alongside Gyarados in every single region except for Unova so far, because it just exists in every region except there naturally. Now, the first entry here is Weasel and Floatzel. They're just super otters that use inflatable flotation sacks in order to make their hunting easier. And in the event of having to outspeed prey or predator, Floatzel uses its propeller tail to get out of dodge. Honestly, they're just eating fish and mussels, though they might get a little bit more territorial, so I wouldn't bother them all the time, or you're getting a water gun to the face. They seem a little aggressive sometimes in Legends Arceus. Shellos and Gastrodon are also pretty tame. They'll move along the coast, but aren't going to do much in the end. They're more focused on not being prey themselves, and being these weird sponges that when squeezed, release this sticky purple fluid to gum up predators' mouths and escape. The only real threat is that Gastrodon's fluid that it releases as it just walks can break down their food for them. But since they are coastal, they are likely using it to break down whatever is in the sand and then gorging on whatever they passed over. So just don't get run over by them and you'll be perfectly fine. Along the coast, you might also find Budew and its line. This is basically because they like fresh, clean water and non-polluted environments. But if those environments are ruined at all, Budew will filter out all the toxins and release them in the form of spores that will likely kill you. The more dirty the environment or the water itself, the stronger the toxins. Also, don't steal the roses from Roselia or it will strike you down, let alone Roserade, which has fast and slow enacting poisons, depending on how it feels, that it will use to torture you and put you down, wrapping you up in its thorny vines. And again, just don't take the flowers and keep the environment clean and you'll be just fine. Also, Drifloon and Drifblim might frequent the waters together as well, since Drifblim does hunt specifically for plant pearls. So there's the chance that they might kidnap you if they're able to lift you up and make a new friend, but they're not really eating you, they're just dropping you off somewhere. Luckily, we get some more friends in the form of Mantike and Mantine, which are even friends with Remoraid and possibly even Octillery, considering they help each other survive and evolve. Mantine also has enough of a docile nature that allows us to ride on it and surf on the waves of Alola. Finny and Luminion are just fancy fish that love to jump out of the water and fly a little bit, or at least that's what Finian does before it might accidentally get grabbed by a Wingull while trying to avoid predators within the water itself. Luminion, though, will walk along the sea floor and chew on some Staryu. Not really a threat to us. The last friend of Sinnoh is actually Manaphy, even Phione for that matter, and they are about as friendly as it gets, especially when the move Heart Swap is used, which can be done while Phione is even still in the egg. What this does is allow the opposing Pokemon to understand the emotions and perspective of Manaphy or Phione, or even other people in the anime, and this effectively opens up their heart and mind to be more compassionate, friendly, and kind. So if you ever find yourself in the absolute worst of scenarios in the seas of Sinnoh, then you best pray to Arceus that Manaphy or Phione drift by and are able to save you from a dangerous predator. So, verdict on the survivability of Sinnoh? Honestly, just like Hoenn. Just stay away from the ocean, don't kick any Magikarp, maybe stay away from Floatzel territory, and you'll actually have a great time here. So far then, it's kind of a it's kind of a coin toss as to where you would survive if you went to a random region. Just don't go to the big open waters. The Big Apple of Unova is here, and so are Simipour and Panpour. They're found primarily near water sources, or even if they aren't, they can become very friendly, or be very friendly monkeys that would even share some of their own personally created nutrient-rich water that they send out from their spout. A safe start to a region that would otherwise bring to us some very terrifying water dwellers. The Temple line does feel a little bit trickier. Temple is just an oversized tadpole trying to live its life until it evolves into Palpitoad, which causes a couple of problems. Now, it is much larger, being roughly 2.5 feet tall, and it will use its tongue to immobilize prey, pairing it with small earthquakes, really tremors. Its specific prey is not stated, but we know that its inspiration, the Japanese common toad, is more interested in earthworms, beetles, and general insects. Even Seismitoad isn't actually a direct threat, but I would still not mess with it, as in the wild, we have the following information. The various lumps on its body have varying capabilities. The ones on its head can shoot a paralyzing liquid, while the ones on its hands can be vibrated to increase its punching power. It can also vibrate the lumps as a source of torment for its opponents, or use them to create earthquake-like tremors. Imagine a Seismitoad grabbing your head and just letting the vibration happen, and it just liquefies your brain. That is what I imagine what that means. Seismitoad is popular among the elderly, who use the lump's vibrations for massages. Seismitoad is also known to wield venom, and is related to Croagunk and Toxicroak. Fairly capable of making sure that you don't see tomorrow, but don't mess with it. It's not going to mess with you. Seems actually fairly friendly. Our next entry is actually a little bit of an invasive species thanks to humanity, as we have Basculin. They reproduce fast, they are released into the wild illegally, and they have an incredibly hard head and hearty appetite. They're so aggressive that they are considered thugs and will attack anything and everything that enters their water, even other Basculin. They literally will have turf wars between red stripe and blue stripe Basculin groups, though every once in a while you might find a blue stripe amongst the group of a red stripe and vice versa without them attacking each other. They are fierce but delicious if you can manage to catch them without being eaten in return by these 3-foot or 1-meter beasts. They're basically another piranha despite their bass basis, and they're kind of hard to miss, so just keep your eyes out and you're going to be perfectly fine. Ducklet and Swanna are also of no consequence. In fact, Ducklet consumes peat and bog moss only. Meanwhile, Swanna doesn't state a diet, but it does, you know, care closely for Ducklet, so we can assume that they have very similar diets, unlike normal ducks, which will eat more than just that. And I don't know, they're just friendly little ducks and swans that we can just probably feed some frozen peas to. And then there's the scary jellyfish. Because while Tentacool and Tentacruel might be a little bit aggressive, they aren't necessarily going to be attacking entire cruise ships, like Frillish and Jellicent will. To be fair, Frillish doesn't really do this on its own, but instead of paraphrasing, how about I read you their info directly. Frillish is a hadopelagic Pokemon which lives in dens about 5 miles, 8 kilometers under the sea surface. Because of this, it can cope with extremely dark and highly pressurized sea conditions. It is carnivorous. It gently floats around in waves until it can strike its prey. It makes its victim numb with the use of its poison spikes and takes it to its deep den. Its arms are filled with tens of thousands of poisonous stingers. This is a legend. There is a legend where Frillish are said to have been created from transformed residents of a sunken ancient city, and it preys primarily on Magikarp and Lantern. Meanwhile, Jellicent can absorb seawater and project it from its head, which lets it move forward in the sea. Jellicent's body composition is similar to seawater. Schools of them are known to gather for prey during a full moon. Any fancy cruise ships, tankers, or crew that would wander into the oceans where it dwells are never found again. And it is rumored that it drags these ships or tankers into the sea and preys on its passengers. It can create layers from sunken ships. It is known to feed on life energy, where the more it drains, the bigger its crown gets. Jellicents are highly feared by fishers, and for good reason. I'm not going to describe it in full detail or excruciating detail, but I want you to imagine that you saved up, finally get to go on a big old vacation. You go on a cruise ship, and the next thing you know, your entire ship is being enveloped by an infinite number of tentacles that starts to drag the entirety of your ship down. And you can either go down with the ship, hoping that the Jellicents will have become full, so that way they do not find you appetizing anymore, giving you a slim chance of survival, or you jump and accept your terrifying fate to the denizens of the deep. Both options are terrible, and I hope you have a strong Pokemon to help you fight and survive instead. Never go down without a fight. Frillish and Jellicent actually make me wonder how people even get anything to Unova other than by flight. How are people getting goods in and out using cargo ships, or, you know, what transport is really being used? I get it. The entire ocean isn't covered in these Pokemon, but one wrong turn and everything disappears. The insurance rates must skyrocket in Unova. They aren't obvious monsters of destruction like Gyarados either. You will disappear, and that is terrifying enough to keep me away from Unova's water permanently. Or at least any waters that could have even a single Frillish in it. And I get it, yes, you could do aerial transportation, but there's efficiency in power and energy, and infinity energy is not being used by all of the regions, as we know. Conversely enough, I would absolutely enter waters that have Alola in them, since they are based on Mola fish. There's also a pretty good chance that they actually eat Frillish. If you want more proof on that, again, go check out my Unova ecology video, but Alola is so friendly and useful that they're even brought along by fishermen in place of medical kits in the event that anybody gets injured, since it can use its mucus to heal wounds. Too bad it can't revive me if I die. While the Tynamo line isn't typically found on watery routes within the games, they are depicted to be found in water anyway. Tynamo is too small to be much of a threat, generating only enough electricity to get by and eat other tiny Pokemon, primarily insects like Joltik actually. Electric, on the other hand, is a vigorous carnivore and has a good appetite. Upon spotting prey, it immediately coils around it and shocks it, using its electricity-generating organs to paralyze it before eating it. It dwells in caves and marine environments, but I'm not done yet, because then we have Eelektross, who lives in the ocean, duh, but it crawls ashore using its arms in order to hunt. It latches onto prey with its sucker mouth and shocks them with electricity from its fangs before dragging them as it returns into the ocean. And it is a 6'11" or 2.1 meter Pokemon in length. We are not safe from this Pokemon. Look at your family 1 second and they're fine. They're enjoying the sun, the sand, the waves, and you look back after another second and they're all being dragged into the waters, unable to even yell for help as they are completely paralyzed or even knocked out from the electrical power of an eel. Why is Unova the spit take of Arceus? If you're lucky, I guess there's always the chance that you run into Keldeo, though, as it ejects water from its hooves and runs across the water, but I mean, otherwise it's just here to ensure that Pokemon are safe from people since it joined these swords of justice. So, you know, don't mistreat your Pokemon. That actually covers the waters of Unova, and personally, that's a very hard no from me. I'm sure that's a huge shocker. I would likely die, and it would be a terrifying one based on all of that information. A very slow, terrifying death. But hey, I guess somebody had to take the mantle since Gyarados isn't here in this region. We've gone from one city to another as we are now in Fantasy Paris, otherwise known as Kalos. Many of our scary Pokemon do make a return here like Sharpedo and Crawdons, but they at least aren't hard to avoid. But it's when we decide to take a nice little stroll along the coast of Kalos that we begin to run into everything that we should be genuinely afraid of, starting with the seemingly innocent Inkay that will evolve into the big brain terror that is Malamar. Inkay is no different than, say, a bioluminescent squid, using its spots to flash lights within the water and attract prey to it. Actually, not even bioluminescent. You don't have to be bioluminescent to do that. There's a number of like cuttlefish and other squids, octopi that will actually do that because they can mimic patterns across their body. It's mesmerizing. Now, soon after, it will continue to blink these lights until the prey is completely mesmerized, and then it will capture them. It, in turn, will then use these lights to communicate with its own kind, and it is a little bit naive, being attracted to anything that emits light or echoing sounds similar to its own. Malamar, though, just deserves the full direct quotes because it is that much of a terror through the direct information that it is confirmed through the games and the anime. Malamar possesses strong hypnotic powers, which are said to be the most powerful of any Pokemon. Malamar uses its hypnotic power to force others to do its bidding. Those under Malamar's control will lose their memories surrounding the event. People often utilize this ability for nefarious deeds. Malamar's hypnotic powers are said to have played a role in several history-changing events. We could have entire centuries of information lost because of this Pokemon, and you think that you can take it, that you can beat it, that you can handle it? No. That you can even fight against it? Sure, if you are wearing a thick helmet of aluminum in order to keep out its psychic energy, I suppose. It lures prey with the flashing pattern on its luminescent body and hypnotic motions. Then ensnares them in its tentacles. The prey is then finished off with digestive fluids. Ugh. Both the animated series and the TCG show Malamar living near water or even underwater, as shown in the Pokemon the Series X and Y episode Kalos, where dreams and adventures begin! It uses its tentacles to propel itself, swimming leg first. As depicted in A Conspiracy to Conquer and Facing the Grand Design, Malamar is shown to be highly intelligent, reaching almost human levels, and capable of running devices designed and handled by humans. They were also intelligent enough to plot, create a spaceship, and prepare to take over the world multiple times, although this was a very specific set of Malamar that had done this and does not actually include them all. Honestly, if this Pokemon really wanted to, it could just hypnotize us, have us walk over, and get eaten by it without any effort whatsoever based on that information. Were it not for historical records, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to brainwash society itself to think that we're supposed to be eaten by them, that we're supposed to worship them and help them in everything that they do. It's just an intensely nefarious creature, but not the most nefarious. Despite how terrifying it looks, and despite it being every aspiring artist's nightmare, Binacle and Barbarical really aren't a threat in the slightest. They're all just a bunch of rock hands that like to eat seaweed. In fact, in terms of biological composition, they're no different than Dugtrio. More territorial Pokemon are on our hands or more aptly within our waters, while Skrelp itself is just your average seahorse still, poor swimmer, gets washed up on swords, just tries to exist through eating decaying plant matter such as the seaweed that it likes to reside in. Its evolution Dragalge is the menace to cargo ships once more, making me really wonder once again how goods are even getting between regions. Dragalge is a territorial Pokemon that will spit poison at whatever trespasses on its territory. Its poison is strong enough to melt the hulls of metal tinkers. As a result, it is said that ships sailing through the seas where it lives never return. Once more, remember, if you go sailing on the seas, there's a very good chance that you will never be seen again or your body. So, I'm incredibly inclined to say I want to stay away from the deep seas and oceans surrounding Kalos. Thank you very much, but let's continue on Dragalge here. It hunts by hiding in seaweed and then ambushing prey, such as Finizen, with a spray of poisonous liquid. However, it is known to coexist with Dalmise. Dragalge can create dragon energy by absorbing the sunlight through the plume on its head. And don't worry, we'll discuss Dalmise soon enough in Alola. Launcher struggles to swim, especially in a straight line, but will actively shoot down any flying prey out of the air with the water that is expelled through the use of an internal gas. Its arm is a literal water gun, and if you think it's just a little bit of pain, remember that this is water that has enough power to shatter rock at close range. So if you think they're cute, you try to pick one up. It'll bore a hole through your chest point blank, like a musket. You will become a donut. But hey, if you can catch one, their meat is said to be delicious. Clawitzer are a territorial species known to fiercely battle against each other. Clawitzer's massive claw can suck up water and launch it as compressed cannonballs capable of piercing tanker hulls. By using the gases inside its body, water can also be expelled from the nozzle on the back, which allows it to travel at speeds of up to 60 knots. That is 69 miles per hour. 69, or 111 kilometers an hour. Imagine a peaceful day out on Kalos. The waters are nice and calm. There's no terrifying creatures in the area. You are enjoying the day. This is supposed to be a nice, open, calm area with no major predators whatsoever. The sun shines down upon you as you float upon your back, soaking in these rays, and then you're rammed by a 4-foot 77-pound cannonball of a body that is clawed, sir. And not because it is trying to hit you, no, because it is just traveling through the area and you are just drywall, floating in the water, a bit of driftwood, if you will, as it snaps your spine in half, all by accident. And that's not even to talk about if it decides it wants you out of its territory and fires water at you. The last two additions are actually pretty tame with Bergmite and Avalugg, which in all reality, once again, just don't challenge them, especially as Bergmite is a fairly friendly Pokemon that rides on Avalugg as they travel to new lands, breaking any ice that it might encounter while floating off to wherever it's going. So Kalos is definitely not on my list of places to swim in the waters of. Sure, could get lucky and stick to small ponds, but even then, Pokemon such as Inkay can be found outside of the water. And then if that doesn't take me out, then I guess I have to worry about the seaweed itself actually being alive and trying to melt me from the outside, let alone all the other threats that are normally here from other regions. In other words, Kalos took what was already scary and, just like Unova did, made it worse. Thank you, and please apologize for your sins. I'm praying to Arceus that Alola is actually even remotely better, but I know for a fact if I just look at the water, I will die in an instant, especially considering that they are nothing but islands surrounded by water. So if there is even a singular terrifying beast of the deeps residing within it, I am not living or visiting Alola. Starting out, we have the pancake-loving Alolan Raichu, which is our greatest of friends here in Alola, as it loves to ride the Alolan waves and surf them day in to day out, granting us at least a little bit of a safety net as long as they are around. If you're tall, you might find yourself being climbed up by Crabrawler, or, you know, let's say you have some tall trees, or literally anything else that gives this Pokemon a vantage point, because, like any normal house cat, apparently, this boxing crab has decided that it wants to sit on top of high perches. The issue with this is that if you try to remove it, it will only result in you getting into the ring with the Muhammad Ali of crustaceans, as it boxes you silly and provides you with 73 concussions. You're just stuck with the funny little crab for the rest of your life, unless you find someone to pawn it off to, or something, I suppose, assuming that it wants to actually leave you. Fortunately for us, its evolution is really only found deep in the snowy mountains and is otherwise a non-threat unless you run into it. If you like sushi or eating fish in general, you should probably just stay away from Wishy-Washy, because while on the surface, when they are by themselves, they are cute, but weak, pitiful, and all-around supposedly delicious Pokemon. But any time a Wishy-Washy is in danger and there are others nearby, it will form its full school form. The people of Alola and Galar also fear Wishy-Washy and call it the Demon of the Sea due to this form. Even the fearsome Gyarados and Wailord are known to flee from it when it enters school form. Wishy-Washy assumes this form whenever a Wishy-Washy is in danger or is being bullied. It can concentrate their powers when assembled. The school form's water gun is said to be more powerful than a hydro pump move. Should it get wounded in this form, it will split into a regular school before fleeing. Not a problem in the end, unless you really love fish, and then you might find yourself waking up on the other side, because if Gyarados is afraid of it, you should be too. Breeding and Toxapex are more of a threat if you accidentally step on them or touch them, or it mistakes you for their next meal. This is because while Marini might wrap its tentacles around you and poison you, Toxapex will do a lot more damage. Its spines can also be fired at enemies and carry a powerful poison, which causes pain for 72 hours or 3 days, even to Pokemon as large as Wailord. After effects of the venom remain even after recovery. If a foe bypasses its spines, it attacks with claws instead. Itty bitty body, massive damage. So even if it doesn't kill you, you aren't going to be happy to exist for a while as long as the toxins continue to flow through your nerves. Little old Drupiter is our diving bell spider, which only breathes oxygen through dissolved water, basically like a fish, and so they put a nice little bubble around their head. No threat yet, as they act like normal 1-foot-tall spiders. Araquanid, though, uses the bubble around its head as both a weapon and a protective shield. The bubble it launches will have a sticky effect. I kind of imagine like the Incredible scene with the giant like goopy restraining spheres that even hold him down. It will headbutt enemies with it, and small Pokemon can be sucked in and drowned. Foes it traps inside these bubbles will lose consciousness before getting torn apart by Araquanid's gnashing jaws. Subdued prey can also be stored inside when the Araquanid is not hungry. However, it will also bring weaker Pokemon and valuable items into the bubble for protection. Notably, it carries around its dupe-hider children while feeding them with food within the head bubble. With a little bit of estimating, that bubble is about 3 feet tall, considering that Araquanid is 5'11". This means there is the possibility that it might eat a child. No confirmation though, I just want you to remember that spiders just kind of eat whatever they can, and this one isn't constrained to the boundaries of water. It will walk on land and tower over you, or get close to towering over at least the average person. Wimpod. Funny little Wimpod. Scared, wimpy, stays out of trouble. Stays within small caves. Though that is all because Wimpod is actually just the Magikarp of this generation, even though Magikarp is here, eventually evolving into Golisopod, who has a shell as tough as diamonds and retractable claws that can cleave seawater in two. While it is skillful in battle, it often meditates peacefully deep in seaside caves. It is sometimes accompanied by Wimpod, and Golisopod will do anything to win a fight. When it sees an opening to take advantage of, Golisopod will use the small claws on its front legs to finish off its opponent. Grapploct is the natural predator or prey of Golisopod, all depending on who wins the fight. Honestly, it's really hard to say whether it's actually dangerous or not right off the bat, but I'm willing to bet that as long as you don't challenge it, you don't have to worry about dying today. The real threats of Alola are the ones that won't go after you, but instead make little minions of your children through their ghostly power held within Sandygast or Palossand. Sandygast is known to inhabit beaches and is born from grudges that seep into the sand, such as from Pokemon that suffered defeat in battle or the deceased. It can suck the life force from people or Pokemon through its mouth, and apparently in the Alola region, sticking a hand in the Sandygast's mouth is a way of proving one's bravery or courage. A person who grabs Sandygast's shovel or puts a hand in the mouth falls under its control. That makes it scarily easy for this Pokemon to get its minions. We actively understand that doing these things will cause it to take over our mind and body, yet we do it anyway. For the meme. Sandygast uses this power to make children add sand to its body so it can become bigger. Sandygast cares a lot about the shovel on its head, and if it loses its shovel, it may replace it with something like a branch or a flag. But it is said to keep searching for its lost shovel in the meantime. It attacks prey by flinging sand into their eyes. However, since it is very slow, its prey tend to escape before it can approach them. So, just outrun Sandygast, don't fall asleep while sunbathing. Got it. Its evolution, though, is an entirely different story. Palossand has the power to control the sand, and each grain of its body has a will of its own. It curses and controls people and Pokemon alike, making them gather sand for it to build upon its body. Unlike Sandygast, Palossand is able to replenish any sand that it loses on its own. The shovel on Palossand's head rotates when it searches for prey and is believed to function as a radar. Palossand can be found at beaches, having been referred to as the beach nightmare. However, it does hate water. It cannot maintain its castle-like structure during heavy rainfall, and as seen in the Pokemon the Series episode, A Shivering Shovel Search, Palossand can manipulate its size to grow to the size of a building and whip up sandstorms with its swing of its tower-like arms. Palossand captures smaller Pokemon into its sandy body by dragging them down into the sand. Once they are trapped, it drains their vitality whenever it pleases, so you're kept alive until it's done with you. Until all there is left under its body are the dried up bones of its victims, which Palossand is able to fire from the hollows of its arms. The aforementioned Pokemon this series episode shows that trapped victims are unable to escape Palossand's body unless it has suffered enough damage. Otherwise, they will be pulled back inside. It also suggests that Palossand is not able to drain the life form of humans, but I doubt that. Whenever it passes, traces of its victims' ill will are left, which are said to be the genesis of new Sandygast. Do I even need to say anything else about this Pokemon? It could theoretically take over an entire island if it had the right conditions. That alone, once again, makes Alola a dangerous place no matter where you are. Just do your best and never step on Pikamuku and you won't have a god smack of a slap coming your way. You'll be okay. While Bruxus can be aggressive, it is primarily just an ambush predator that waits for prey such as Shelder and Marini to come near. Then it strikes. Sure, your foot might get bitten. Sure, you might have a massive headache if it grinds its teeth while it bites you, as that is how it stimulates its psychic powers, but it is not an active threat and is not actively hunting you. It turns out that lifeguards actually allow this Pokemon to exist in the area where people swim in order to deter more dangerous Pokemon from arriving. So at least someone out there is helping keep the beachgoers safe, unlike literally every other region we've talked about so far. They're also pretty hard to miss, considering that the sunlight reflecting on the ripples it creates will cause the water to shine very brightly. Low threat. Time for another threat to all of existence, whether you're in the water or not, as we can talk about Dhelmise. It is seaweed brought to life by the energy of ghosts, essentially. Really, the souls of individuals that come from sunken ships that bound themselves to the seaweed. It will continue to do everything it can in order to continue to grow, which expands its reach, in addition to the sheer amount of force it can release as it swings its anchor. Centripetal force, baby. That anchor is used to actively hunt large Pokemon, specifically the one that it prefers, being Wailord, which it will knock out in one blow. The One Punch Man of the Seas, if you would. Now, it is massive, 12 foot 10 or 3.9 meters, and is very aggressive, and will try to reach you while you are on land. So your best bet is to just keep running deep into the island, the center of it, as far and as fast as possible, where hopefully its seaweed is not long enough to reach. If it does reach you and wraps its seaweed around you, then your life force will be drained. Because of course, that's just what our ghosts do. My theory though, is that considering Dhelmise and Dragalge are so intertwined with each other, like they cohabitate, they cooperate, they're friendly with each other, there's a very good chance that the souls that make up Dhelmise might actually be the souls of the people that Dragalge took down after it destroyed the bolt hole and caused them to drown. Tapu Fini is our last entry here in Alola and really isn't much of a threat unless you decide to harm others on the island or take its challenge. Then you might be seeing your dead loved ones real soon and going insane. As Guardian of Pony Island, Tapu Fini can freely manipulate water and it gains energy from ocean currents. Tapu Fini is both respected and feared. To avoid harm to itself in battle, it shrouds itself in its surroundings in a mysterious fog that sends its opponents into a self-destructive trance. The Guardian also unleashes this fog as a test for those who seek the special water it can create, which can purify anything it touches. Many humans have attempted this trial, including those with ill intent. Disgusted by this history, Tapu Fini does not care much for humans. Despite this, it is willing to help those who prove themselves worthy. As seen in Run Heroes Run, Tapu Fini has shown to be able to make water clocks out of water and bridge the world of the living with the world of the dead using mist. As stated in Memories in the Mist, long periods of exposure to this mist can trap people within it forever, specifically targeting those who cannot endure the pain of seeing a deceased loved one again, making Alola a place I would rather ensure I don't swim in the deep waters of and not challenge their gods. Do you want to swim in an environment that was forced to harden itself every single day, including its Pokemon to the next level in order to even survive the normal day-to-day process? Would you like to see Pokemon that would otherwise normally spew poison into the air now becoming Pokemon that actually purify the air because the air itself is just that terrible and toxic? Well, you're in luck, as we are now in Galar. Choodle is here and just teething, and it is a snapping turtle, so it's kind of a no-brainer that you should probably not stick your fingers near its mouth. There's even a children's game involving the idea that they take a stick, give it to one Choodle, it bites on, they go to the other Choodle, it bites onto the other end, and then they just kind of pull the Choodles and see which one holds on the longest. So basically no threat there. Though Dreadnought has sharp, jagged fangs that are powerful enough to chomp on rock, iron, and steel rods. It captures prey and fights opponents by chomping down on them. It can extend its neck very quickly to reach enemies that are farther away. Due to its well-developed muscles, it can move very fast despite its heavy shell. Dreadnought are notoriously vicious to the point where it requires a skilled trainer to fully tame and handle it. And of course, some trainers will release Dreadnought into the wild once they find they are unable to handle it. It lurks along shorelines, biting on prey, then approaches dwelling, searching for drinking water. Great, so we have irresponsible trainers once again releasing a potentially dangerous but knowingly aggressive Pokemon into the wild that can easily bite onto steel, or potentially through it. Mind you, our bones are not stronger than steel, meaning that, especially since it can run fast despite its size, we need to stay far away from wherever this massive snapping turtle resides. So sure, Cramorant is also here. It'll eat fish, spit out Pikachu, whatever. We do have Galarian Corsola and Cursula, but I don't really count them because they're found in dried out areas where prehistoric seas once were. So, I mean, just don't kick them because they often get mistaken for rocks, and then they steal your life force, and then they become a giant ectoplasm monster, and they're really cool and one of my favorite variants, but not really much to talk about there considering they're not coastal or in the water. And otherwise, we're getting a lot of the terrifying Pokemon from other regions. Jellicent, Malamar, Araquanid, Basculin, Wishiwashi, Dhelmise, and Gyarados. Literally alike the majority of the big, nasty players of the other regions. Makes sense again, because this is an incredibly harsh environment and only the toughest of the tough are supposed to survive here. Clobbopus isn't even really a threat either. Sure, you might get a Charlie horse from it, since what it does is it investigates things by punching them, so it'll just walk up to something, not knowing what, I don't know, a child is, and then BAH! Gone. I mean, a broken nose or something. It just doesn't understand what it's doing. It's not trying to actually hurt anybody. Meanwhile, Grappllock is a little aggressive. I mean, in the games, it does actively try to approach you, but it just enjoys a good fight more than anything, so you might get lucky as long as it doesn't see you as a potential strong opponent. Pincurchin is easily frightened, so the odds of you stepping on its electrified spikes are also pretty low. Ice-Q just likes to have a block of ice around its head, and it's pretty easy going as it hunts after fish, and even the Dreepy line would rather avoid conflict than actually fight anyone, as they might try to prey upon Clawitzer even though they don't actually eat them. Honestly, a Pokemon that seems really dorky on the surface but could potentially be scarier if accidentally so is Arrokuda, if it could actually try or wanted to attack you. Arrokuda can only swim in a straight line, and should it see any movement near it, it will charge ahead using its sharp pointed jaws. However, its poor eyesight causes it to miss frequently. Its movements also tend to become sluggish when it eats too much, which is typically when Cramorant and Watch will appear to swallow it up. This is actually very similar to Barracuda in real life, which is what this Pokemon is based on. And those animals, those fish in real life, actually have pretty poor eyesight as well, which is why 99% of attacks from them are actually accidental. Once it does evolve into Barraskewda, it doesn't, did I say Arrokuda earlier? Whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Either way, once it does evolve into Barraskewda, it doesn't seem to have bad eyesight anymore, and it's not very interested in eating or even attacking people, despite its 100 knot speed, which is 115 miles per hour or 185 kilometers an hour. Now, the last one I actually forgot to write out is Galarian Slowking, which is an absolute terror and one of the most evil Pokemon of all time, if not arguably the most evil Pokemon of all time, and I'm about to tell you why. Look, this Pokemon sits here and decides, you know what, I'm going to test on the poor. I'm literally going to take the food and mix it within my own toxins to create potions that I have no idea what they do whatsoever. I'm then going to test this on weak Pokemon and see what the effects are. They chant in their own weird warlock language between each other and are just generally really devious in terms of what they do. It is less the Slowpoke's fault and more the Shelder's fault, as in this case, instead of the Cloyster biting onto this, the head of the Slowpoke and the Slowpoke gaining intelligence to become Slowking, instead the Galarica seeds that have changed the chemical composition within the Slowpoke, once the Shelder bites onto the head of that, it creates a new complication, a new chemical composition that results in the Shelter growing over the Slowpoke's head as it becomes Slowking, and the Shelter gains the intelligence and full control of the Slowpoke's body. And they are arguably one of the most intelligent Pokemon of all time. So yeah, not a Pokemon I want to be around. Ultimately, Galar, while not having a lot of new coastal or water-based Pokemon, has every single threat, once again, from the past generations or regions here, making this, in my opinion, the worst place to swim. At least so far, because future generations could prove me wrong one day. We'll take a little time machine back into the past and just quickly mention a new set of Pokemon within Hisui. This is mainly because Hisui and Qwilfish and Overqwil are actually incredibly aggressive compared to their modern counterparts and would rely on using their poisonous spikes without shooting them off of their body. At least, not constantly. This is also the point where Overqwil itself will even have its spikes automatically react while it is asleep and stab anything that approaches it. Though, they are really only ever seen in the coldest parts of the world, and you just need to stay away from them. And we could give kind of an honorable mention to Hisui and Goodra, and talk about Goodra a little bit as well, because both of their lines need plenty of water and moisture in order to stay happy, but it is through the iron-rich waters of Hisui that we have the shell on Hisui and Goodra, giving it a stronger defense. The only threat is if you actively try to attack them, in which case Goodra does have the power to hit you with horns that can, and I quote, hit 100 times harder than the blow of a heavyweight boxer. That translates to the power of about 15 sticks of dynamite, so don't make it angry. We've reached the final region for today as we can finally talk about Paldea, and we are even blessed to open up with one of the fan favorites, Paldean Wooper and Clodsire. They're basically the bullied version of Wooper that didn't get to stay near the water and keep their skin properly moist, so they eventually adapted to life primarily out of the water, as their skin is covered in a poisonous mucus that keeps them alive. Clodsire is just gonna ferry its own babies across the water, or even just other Wooper in general, and do its best to protect them. In a last-ditch effort, if it absolutely has to, it will release large purple spines from a spot on its body, or multiple spots on its body, which can be a very risky move for itself. Peaceful Pokemon otherwise that has the same general diet as its other form. Don't touch their mucus and touch their mouth. It is poisonous, and I mean, Clodsire is a different species from Quagsire, but nevertheless, they're all pretty happy, and I want a giant Clodsire plush now. Another easygoing and non-threat Pokemon is Tadbulb and Bellibolt. In fact, Bellibolt is so easygoing that it is actually hard to train as a battling Pokemon. Watchel and Kilowattrel are also not a threat since they just hunt for fish and are electric petrels. Wiglet isn't really a problem, but Wugtrio kind of is, as this little grass eel is known to be a little aggressive, wrapping its 3 bodies around prey and dragging them down to its lair. And each of them are about 4 feet long, at least that's what we can see above the surface, so just hope that they aren't extra hungry and decide to drown you one day. If they don't drown you, you might get a concussion from Bombardier, which decides it'd be fun to just drop a funny little rock on your head as it's hunting for Basculin. So it won't actively try to kill you for food, but it might decide to hurt you as a little treat. Finizen and Palafin are literally heroes of friendship. Hero form Palafin gains strength and energy with more cheers from people because it's a superhero. And then we have the aggressive and moving in gangs Pokemon Flamigo, as it pulls its neck back in unison with its flock to punch you into the dirt. So yeah, they synchronize beating you down. Real fun, but you can see them coming a mile away. They're vibrant pink. What do you want? Oh no, if they're pink, then okay. All right, I'm gonna tell you about a small tangent. Let's take a quick tangent. Flamingos are pink not because of the fact that they eat the shrimp or the krill or whatever that makes them pink. No, instead it's because of the fact that when they eat them, there are proteins that are then on their beak that they then preen their feathers with, and that turns their feathers pink. So theoretically, if the proteins would color them, or if the proteins would create a blue, we could have blue flamingos, so on and so forth. Again, It's just the proteins that combine with their feathers to then create that color on their body. So if that's the case, then what is Flamigo eating that is causing that? Also, it's not just shrimp specifically, it is algae. So I'll throw that out there. They do eat other foods, but those are like the things that help make them have their color. Now, do I even need to say Veluza is aggressive? I mean, if you've played the game, you know for a fact that the #1 fear within the waters that lag, unfortunately, is the fact that there is something much faster and breaks through the barriers of the lag walls, and it's coming straight for you the second that it sees you. And it's a little bit of a masochist, as it will fillet itself in order to move faster, ensuring that its prey never escapes it. Also, apparently, that filleted, like, parts is supposed to be delicious, so if you really want to risk your life, go for it. Otherwise, once it does fillet itself, you're actually in more danger, as its offensive prowess and its psychic power goes up with its agility. Tatsugiri basically drive Dodonzo since they team up together. The problem with judging their danger towards us is that Dodonzo is basically a catfish and they will eat whatever comes near their mouth. Meanwhile, at least with Tatsugiri's guidance, it might just eat other fish, while Tatsugiri itself will bait bird Pokemon for itself to eat when it's by itself. What I would like to assume, that once again, is that unless we antagonize them, they will not attempt to take revenge and eat us. So then we throw in other Pokemon that are in this region that we should be a little afraid of: Clawitzer, Eelektross, Dragalge, Palossand, Gyarados, Basculin, maybe Crabrawler if you're tall, or Golduck if you go near its territory. But honestly, if you can stay away from like the dragon area, pretty mid-place in terms of danger. Just don't go into the deep Paldea seas. So out of all the places, where do you think you would be able to survive best? I'm personally sticking with Hoenn myself, which is not what I personally expected, but Paldea is weirdly a close second, just because of the more helpful and heroic Pokemon, especially since there's a lot of high land without water near it, or at least far away from the water. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe, throw out some comments, share this with others, go watch my other videos, and if you want to go the extra mile, please become a member for as little as $3 a month. It helps small channels like mine a ton, as I continue to grow the channel and try to build up the quality of the videos, of course, and provide special videos, or streams for that matter, to make things even more interesting and cover topics that other PokeTubers might not be covering in detail. So, with that, thanks to all of our members that you are seeing on screen, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I want to do, don't think I want to do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!